Okay, welcome everyone. I'm very excited to start the School of Natural Sciences Senior Symposium keynote event. This is part of the I4 lecture series hosted by or sponsored by the I4 Institute. I would like to acknowledge our participants. Thanks to all the students who are attending today. I also want to acknowledge, thank you for President George Martin for attending our event today. I also want to welcome Dr. Fuentes, our next president of the university. Welcome to St. Edward's, and thank you for joining us today as well. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our underwall keynote speaker, Dr. Franz Cordova. We're very excited to have Dr. Cordova as our keynote speaker today. Dr. Cordova is an internationally recognized astrophysicist and was the 14th director of the National Science Foundation. She was nominated for this position by President Obama in 2013 and was confirmed by the US Senate. Dr. Cordova also was the president of Purdue from 2007 to 2012, and she was the first woman to lead the institution. Prior to joining Purdue, Dr. Cordova served as chancellor and distinguished professor of physics and astronomy at the University of California, Riverside from 2002 to 2007. She was also a professor of physics and vice chancellor for research at UC Santa Barbara from 1996 to 2002. From 1993 to 1996, she was the first woman to become the chief scientist at NASA, serving as the primary scientific advisor to the NASA administration. Truth to be told, everywhere Dr. Cordova stepped a foot, she made a great impact. For example, at Purdue, she led the institution to record levels of research funding, reputational ranking, and student retention rates. At UC Riverside, she was instrumental in launching a medical school and community university art museum complex. She's also the winner of the Distinguished Service Medal, which is NASA's highest honor. In 2000, she was recognized as the 2000 Kilby Laureate for contributions to society through science, technology, innovation, invention, and education. At that time, Dr. Cordova was included as one of America's 100 brightest scientists under 40. And that was by the Science Digest magazine. Dr. Cordova's contributions in multi-spectrum research on X-ray and gamma ray sources and space-borne instrumentation have made her an internationally recognized astrophysicist. Without exaggeration, I can honestly take the entire time of this keynote to talk about Dr. Cordova's amazing career, but I think we all want to hear directly from Dr. Cordova. So using some Zoom reactions or sign language, please help me welcome Dr. Cordova.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bilal, and hello, St. Edward's. I'm just very pleased to be talking with you today. And Bilal, that was a very generous introduction and possibly as long as my remarks will be today. So it's good to see your faces, and I hope that we'll have plenty of time for Q&A after my remarks. I'm really pleased to be part of the Senior Symposium Day. I want to congratulate all of the students presenting their research in the natural sciences, their advisors, and also welcome to this moment, Presidents Martin and Fuentes. I know your theme is challenges faced by women in STEM, so I decided for this afternoon that I'd focus on one aspect of my career, namely my last position as director of the National Science Foundation and the challenges that I faced there. It's a simple illustration that you can't be anywhere in any position without challenges, and usually there's a lot of them coming from different sides. How you face challenges can define your values, who you are as a person. So I offer this quote from the noted author James Baldwin to kind of start things off. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So before I get started in talking about NSF, I just want to mention that I really did have a life and a past before NSF, as Bilal was saying. Everything that I am today is because of a path that I followed yesterday. I loved adventure and sport. You can see me rappelling here. I loved rock climbing and backpacking with my spouse. Skiing, this is in Antarctica, bike riding, and just going all over the world. This is from a recent trip to Madagascar. And I spent quite a bit of time in Mexico, and these are my comadres in a little village in the state of Oaxaca in Mexico. I loved doing research, of course, and teaching. And especially I loved being a mom. My children, when they were very young, and cooking, and right now being a grandmother. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to focus on one aspect of my career, which is the opportunity to lead as the director of the National Science Foundation. So the vision that we had was to lead an agency that creates and exploits new concepts in science and engineering and provides global leadership in research and education. I want to just go over a couple of numbers. I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but just two significant ones. One is that we get, and when I say we, I am no longer at NSF. I served a full 6-year term. That is what you legally can do. And I was really the first director to actually serve all 6 years in about 30 years. So when I say we, it's because I just slip into it, okay? But NSF receives tens of thousands of proposals, almost 50,000 proposals a year, and can only fund about 20% of them. And so congratulations, St. Edward's, on receiving funding from NSF. I know you'll do very well by that. The last number here is very interesting. As of 2019, which were the latest firm numbers that we had for the budget numbers on this slide, we had funded 242, I think the number is now up to 250 people who went on to win the Nobel Prize, many of them when they were graduate students, something like over 55 of them, 55 a couple of years ago. So a lot of young people when they're doing their first research. And so the grants have an impact. NSF funds all of science and engineering, as you're finding out. And so here are the various disciplines it funds, from the natural sciences, which we would say is mostly in mathematical and physical sciences, but also there's computer and information sciences, the geosciences, biosciences, a lot of education funding, social and behavioral sciences, and international programs. And because we fund the whole spectrum of research, that's an asset to the nation. But it's also can be a challenge when it comes to priorities of Congress or priorities of the administration, because they may like one type of science and think that it's more worthwhile to fund that than others in a constrained budget. And so we have a lot of back and forth through the decades about that. There have been in the past, and certainly when my first few years as director, vocal suggestions from Congress to have directorate-specific appropriations that they would make. And we said, no, that would lose our flexibility and the science community's ability to chart the course of science priorities. Importantly, we believe that the next discovery that is a breakthrough can come from any fields of science. And today, perhaps a convergence of sciences all coming together to solve a grand challenge. So we thought that the science community should set the priorities for funding. And we presented strong arguments, and we so far have held out. So I want to talk about some of the challenges we faced, and then once I list those, then come back and talk about how we faced them. So Congress had questions about the value and purpose of some of our grants, and that in turn stirred some public mistrust about how we did our funding. So we were facing a lack of public understanding and support for NSF's basic science mission and our much prized merit review system that judges these tens of thousands of proposals and selects winners. And those came, the criticisms were turned into so-called waste books and things like that, just a lot of negative press. And that's what I faced coming into the door of the National Science Foundation. We also faced management challenges from our various oversight bodies in Congress and our own Inspector General's office. And they were not crazy about the way that we handled some big challenges of running some of the larger programs. And so that also is something I faced coming in the door. We face challenges with large facilities because those are big expenditures, and Congress and various auditors had a lot of criticisms about where the money was going and how we accounted for it and all that sort of thing. And I show some pictures here that you might be familiar with. This is one of the neon towers. I noticed on one of the slides Bilal had that neon was represented there, the National Ecological Observatory Network. Our telescopes in Chile, this is a brand new one that's going up, the new Vera Rubin Observatory, and we had some launching difficulties, telescopes in Hawaii. You can see the here that sits on Gemini telescope. And of course, Antarctica, the National Science Foundation runs the US Antarctica program. And I've been there 4 times. We have a big push to completely redo, upgrade the McMurdo Station, which is the largest base out of some 70 different bases, only 3 of which the NSF runs, but the rest are run by other countries in Antarctica. But this is the largest one. And so that also has come under a lot of scrutiny. And then we faced a number of disruptions. For example, we moved the entire agency, all its thousands of people and its hardware, its computers and everything, from Arlington, Virginia to Alexandria, Virginia. And during my time, we actually built from the ground up. This was just an old plot of land next to the Eisenhower Metro Station. We built this building, which is 19 stories tall, and moved everyone into it. But as you can imagine, that was disruptive for the staff. And a lot of them had children in school over in Arlington and families and all, and people all were picking up and moving. And so disruptive. The Metro, famous Washington Metro that most of our staff counted on to get to work, closed down for 4 months to refurbish itself. And there were government shutdowns, including the longest one in history, some 26 business days long, that really were disruptive to our work. We also faced the challenge of political elections. We had the shorter inter-presidential elections of 2014, and then the big election of 2016. We didn't know what to expect, but we experienced a lot of change with that election. And we faced funding challenges. When I came in, which was in 2014, we had had a long period of really flat funding, and how were we going to do more with less? We faced harassment concerns. There were news media articles about gender harassment, at our various field sites, including Antarctica and others as well. And harassment turned out to be just a huge concern for the scientific community. We faced competition from other countries. Every 2 years, the NSF, together with the National Science Board, publishes the status of the state of US science and engineering. It's just chock full of statistics, and we could see clearly a trend over a long period of time that other nations were putting more money into research, and they're catching up with us, especially China, which in 2018 did catch up as far as research and development expenditures. And then we face challenges in locking down our research assets, that some of our research was being stolen by other countries. And again, China came into the crosshairs for that. And there was a lot of concern on the part of Congress and the agencies that have national intelligence oversight, that some of the research that was funded by the science agencies, including NSF, was being appropriated by other countries. So how did we counteract all those challenges? So I'm going to give you some of the ways that we went on the offense. We had played for the first 1.5 years of my tenure at NSF defense. And we felt like we were always defending why we were funding the proposals we were funding, why we did things, managed facilities, managed this and that in certain ways. And we thought what we really need, as you would need in any good confrontation, is a good offense to score some goals. And so we had retreats among the senior leadership, which used the input from the science community when we came together. And we came up with a new strategy for our investment, which we called the 10 Big Ideas for Future Investment. When we went into this planning, we didn't go in thinking we would come out with one idea or 100 ideas, certainly not 10 ideas. We just went in there with the best thinking we could into our retreat mode. And we surfaced with 6 research ideas and 4 enabling ideas for the National Science Foundation. And this turned out to be something very, very different from the agency's previous history. We were, for our nearly 70-year history at that time, used to getting in proposals from wherever, then putting together panels and other types of review groups to assess the merits of the proposals and funding them. So they were kind of a catch as catch can. They didn't have certain use-inspired or direction-inspired planning involved here. And so this was our first attempt at having major signposts for the future. What were the directions we were heading in? And it actually met with great response. So just to go over them very quickly, I can talk about them more in the Q&A, and I'm sure some of you are very familiar with them. There was obviously, in this day and age of big data, data science, big idea. There was the intersection of the humans with the new technology frontier is a very big challenge, and it encompasses everything we do. So we picked out the future of work as being the most important current thing that we could focus on that frontier boundary. Navigating a new Arctic was kind of our climate change approach. And then the era of multi-messenger astrophysics, putting together different ways of looking at the universe, electromagnetic, as well as gravitational wave and neutrino detectors, all of it to come together and make new discoveries about the cosmos. The quantum revolution, another quantum revolution was upon us. And then finally, understanding the rules of life, understanding how one goes from the genotype to the phenotype, and is it possible to predict phenotype from what we know about the genome and its environment. And this turns out to be extremely important in many different areas, including agriculture, as shown in this little picture here. Because if you can improve, for example, the success rate of photosynthesis, which is only 2% efficient, if you could up that to say 20% by using new kinds of engineering methods, then you really could have impact on some world crises. And then we also addressed, as part of this activity, what were the gaps in NSF funding that we really had to pump some investment into. And we came up with 4 big gaps. One was includes, which is enhancing STEM in all its different manifestations through diversity and inclusion. Filling gaps in our research infrastructure. There's a lot of innovation potential in funding areas that would cost, say, $50 million, and we had no funding opportunities for that. We had funding opportunities for a few $1,000,000 at universities and the great big facilities, some of which I showed. Growing convergent research was a powerful idea of bringing together people from different disciplines that are solution driven along certain directions. And that eventually ended up in something called the Convergence Accelerator, which is use-inspired focuses to invest in for the future. And finally, we thought we were the only ones to come up with big ideas, and we wanted to reach out to the community for its ideas. And so we would launch a competition nationwide that would last for a year called the Idea Machine, and have people suggest new big ideas and give awards to the winners. So that was our kind of our frontispiece, our biggest way of overcoming challenges. But we had many, many other ways, and I'll just briefly go through them. We reached out to Congress. We just had countless visits to senators and representatives to talk more about what the value of the research that we are funding was. We accelerated our transparency and accountability efforts. We ensured that proposal abstracts were more clearly written and pointed to the goals of these projects and articulated the anticipated benefits of research. We also spurred more agency partnerships. This picture shows me with the heads of DOE Science, the Undersecretary for Science, Paul DeBar, the head of NIST, Walter Kopan, and the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Kelvin Drogemeyer. And we were the heads of something called the Joint Committee on the Research Environment to improve the environment in which people do research. And we developed a lot more agency partnerships along different programmatic lines. We also hosted various congressional delegations, called CODELs for short, to some of the extreme places on our planet so they could understand, well, why are we so interested in investing in the poles and research in the poles, like the Arctic and the Antarctic? And we wanted Congress to be able to talk with our young researchers out in the field about what they do and why. So the top picture here is in Greenland, and here's at Summit Station, which is in the middle of Greenland, and we flew the Congress members there to see the research that was being conducted, talk to the researchers. And here at the bottom is the South Pole Station, relatively new station for about 10 years or so, that we had constructed, the NSF had. And here are congressmen all at the ceremonial South Pole, learning more about all the facilities we have there, big, powerful research facilities, and meeting with researchers. Then we also hit the policy front with more energy and work. We wrote did reports or sponsored them with all kinds of agencies, including the White House. There's one there on STEM, charting a course for success, America's strategy for STEM education. The National Academies, we funded a number of their reports like reproducibility and replicability in science, frontiers of materials research, and with the National Science Board on many important science policy initiatives, like what it would take to have a truly skilled technical workforce nationally. We also addressed our audit issues and with a lot of force, and had, this won't mean much to many of you, but when you manage a big company or concern or organization, you want to be sure that you have clean audit opinions and you don't have significant deficiencies. And for the first time in a long time during my tenure, we had 3 years in a row up to when I left that the auditors found no significant deficiencies. And so that meant a lot to us because we had worked very, very hard on the management part. Before I came to the agency, that we were in the hole with many significant deficiencies. And we worked hard on this, believing that a good ship to get to its destination must have good bones, a good structure. So we corrected financial and other deficiencies brought to our attention by oversight groups. And the important point here is just keeping on top of things and addressing them as they come up. And then we increasingly took on harassment in science in the engineering community, funding a National Academy study on this. It resulted in the report you see there, Sexual Harassment of Women. And that is by far the most downloaded report in the National Academy's history. And we also changed NSF's term and conditions to hold investigators and their universities accountable. And this was a first for a federal agency, definitely the first for the National Science Foundation. We ramped up our international engagement. This picture is from the Second Arctic Science Ministerial in Berlin. I represented the US at a number of international science venues, including the G7 for Science in Torino, Italy, and the Berlin conference shown here. I spoke in Iceland and Hungary, Ireland, and Chile. I was able to be a strong voice for integrity in research, for our approach to climate disruption, for partnerships, and for the importance of an international global approach that could be informed by science. We hosted international VIPs at NSF to continue discussions about partnerships. They were incredibly interested in things like our big ideas, our convergence accelerators. And we devised a new approach called multipliers to forming international partnerships by sending expert teams to other countries where we could achieve excellence together. We also ramped up our engagement with industry and developed many new public-private partnerships. Here I'm shown in front of a quantum computer at IBM Yorktown with Dario Gil, who's the head of IBM Research. And we, the second picture there is holding a chip, a quantum computer chip at Google Santa Barbara, where right after they had claimed quantum supremacy on the basis of their quantum computer, doing a figuring out a solution, an algorithm responding to it in much, much faster time than an ordinary computer could. We also promoted the Nsf brand much more intentionally. Nsf had always had a reputation as kind of the quiet sister among federal agencies. We're just interested in the principal investigators being out front there in the limelight. But that wasn't very helpful for getting funding from Congress and support from the administration. So we started putting our logo on everything you can see, from Antarctica in the upper left corner to the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Observatory in Livingston, Louisiana, to our airplanes like the one that we supported NCAR in Boulder, Colorado to fly, and of course our neon facilities, but just everywhere, and also insisting in our collaborations with universities that they acknowledge NSF support, as St. Edward's is doing. And so we had a great deal of success with our approach. And again, our approach all boils down to just facing challenges and deciding that we weren't going to let them wash over us or go unattended or ignore them, because nothing gets better when you do that, but that we had to confront and address them. So we had widespread support for the big ideas and its successor efforts, like our accelerator for convergence research. We got a lot of approval from the Congress and administration. Other countries came to visit us to see how we launched these ideas. They couldn't believe we got the government to support them. We had a lot of congressional support here. I'm shown testifying with the chair of the National Science Board, Diane Savain, and we always found a receptive, interested audience with support from both sides of the aisle. We grew the budget because they believed in what we were doing. And we achieved, actually my last data point should be the 2021 budget, which we proposed before I left. It's now at $8.5 billion. We resisted directorate level funding that I told you about earlier, proposed constantly by legislative and executive branches. And we were able to fund a stewardship model to manage the funding of the big ideas. So this was a cross-collaborative model among the disciplines to actually manage them. We had new industry and foundation partners in things like the Simons Foundation that co-sponsored our math biology institutes. Amazon gave a lot of money towards funding grants for artificial intelligence. The Boeing Company, a lot of support, financial support for enhancing engineering curriculum and also women in STEM. And the Kavli Foundation, a number of partnerships with them along neuroscience, nanotechnology, and astrophysical lines. We had a lot of success in being the agency that led the fight against harassment. There's an article in the issue of Science, March 27th of this past year, where I give a very comprehensive view on how we first were alerted to the whole importance of sexual harassment and what it was doing to investigators, especially to women in science, and turning them away from the field. And that our goal was to make the research environment more welcoming and more inclusive. And so I wrote this policy piece for Science Magazine on why and how we fought back against harassment. And then on research security, we decided that we would be among the agency leaders on addressing research security concerns. So we funded an important report from a body of eminent scientists called the Jasons, and their conclusion is shown here. We devised a standardized form for proposers doing their disclosures properly, and it also had the impact of reducing administrative burden and simplifying checks on possible conflicts. But this was a very important report that really put the whole business of research security under the framework of research integrity, and it was well received by Congress and the community. And then we hit another milestone that hadn't been reached in 40 years because the past NSF administrations were a little afraid of tackling it, and that was how to agree with our union employees, of which there are over 1,000, on our collective bargaining agreements. So we had one that was very old, as it says here, 38 years old, and it just definitely needed to be made contemporary. And so it was a big effort, but it was something that we just undertook with seriousness of purpose. It took a few years actually to get it done, but it did get done. And again, that may not mean so much to those of you who are young investigators and don't think about the sort of management things that it also takes. If you have want to be a good science leader, you have to be sure that all your employees are engaged in very positive ways, and that they think that the agreement between management and what they're fighting for, their union benefits and privileges and opportunities, are taken into good account. So we were proud of that. Of course, I'm an astrophysicist. I like to look up. And so what was especially important to me was our success as discovery driver agency. I was thrilled that so much new original work came out of the Union of Astronomy and Physics. From when I was a young scientist hosting the first conference in Taos, New Mexico on multi-wavelength astrophysics, to today in this picture shown here, hosting a press conference to announce the discovery of gravitational waves from merging neutron stars, which was a triumph of multi-messenger astrophysics. I felt caught up in the grand sweep of scientific progress, of discoveries that literally shook the world, and they garnered Nobel Prizes for some. So this is part of NSF advertising to the world that we were the engaged funders of this very important research. So besides being significant for science, it was also significant for the branding of NSF. And again, that's important because the more support that we get, the more appropriations from Congress, the better we can do by the science community. So the discoveries gained worldwide attention for funding high risk, long-term, high reward research. But they did make world headlines. On the left is shown the first detection of gravitational waves, and a few years ago, and it made headlines all over the world. Most recently, the first light of the solar telescope on Haleakala in Maui that NSF built, it was on the cover of the front page above the fold of the New York Times. And of course, probably gaining the most worldwide attention, your newspapers all over the world in every language you can imagine, was the imaging the black hole shadow in M87, a galaxy far away. And it was such a popular image that it became the meme for all sorts of things immediately. I don't know how many of you remember Homer Simpson holding up his donut, which had the shape and color of the black hole image. So the discoveries that were made by researchers that we funded made the covers of Science magazine in 3 of the years I was there, 2016, 17, and 19, for being the science breakthroughs of the year. That is the LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory and its cosmic shaking, the Ice Cube Observatory, which is at the South Pole in Antarctica, with its discovery of the origin of high energy cosmic rays. And the first image of a black hole is shown here. That wasn't on the cover. It came later after the cover was done for that year. But also DKIS image, first image of the churning sun. These were, we're very, very proud that NSF was, voted its discoveries as breakthroughs of the year. So now I want to kind of wrap up the importance of the example that I showed you. And mind you, I've just shown you one example, one person leading an agency committed to research and education in the sciences and determined to make itself a powerful, more prominently recognized agency, more capable of producing scientific discoveries through the research that it funded. So today, global crises reinforce the importance of science and engineering solutions. And these demand that a variety of disciplines come together. The process that I've been referring to as convergence to address them. And examples are climate change on the left here, the breakup of sea ice, which has enormous impacts. Of course, the coronavirus global challenge, and then the world food supply and poverty, and how are we going to handle that? And you can see that in trying to address these, science and engineering have become all important and recognized as such. So I think that responses to crises require bringing our toolbox to the issues at hand. And what do I mean by a toolbox? I mean everything that you've learned along your pathway. And you students are just now making your toolbox and putting in your experiences, your research. And as you go along on your very different pathways, you will be increasing the numbers and kinds of tools you have in there. Every person has a unique role to play, a unique set of tools. I think that good responses to challenges require the following, and this is what I've learned from my experience. It requires a strategic framework. You can't just let stuff happen to you. You have to be out there helping things to happen with a good vision, as clear as you can make it, of where you're going. It requires new partnerships where people, groups come together and are action oriented. It's not, there are partnerships, of course, for friendship and conviviality, but I'm talking about action oriented partnerships. It requires this convergence in approach, that if you're going to truly address some of the challenges, I just gave you 3 examples that face the globe, and there are so many more, it won't just be solved by one discipline working alone, but requires a lot of them coming together. In this day and age, especially, computational thinking and data science tools couldn't be more important in speeding up the whole process of getting from research discovery to its translation to the marketplace. It requires investment in new directions for science, and science is constantly evolving. As new discoveries are made, whole new worlds of questions open up and require new directions. It requires a skilled technical workforce, and that means not just PhD researchers, but all the people that support them, some of whom have gone through community college programs to become part of the skilled technical workforce. It requires an ethical, supportive, and inclusive culture of research. And this just couldn't be more important. I mentioned our efforts to improve the research environment. And we recognize that so many people, even when they get on the pathway towards STEM careers, can be derailed by having an environment that is not supportive, that is not inclusive. And so we are committed to that. And it requires international collaborations to address global crises. So the role of scientists and engineers are vital and demand concerted action, both individually and collectively. I'm fond of saying that it's great to become part of a group and address things that way, but also as individuals, we each have our own unique background, our set of experiences, and we can have a powerful impact as individuals as well as in groups. So I want now at the end of my remarks to come back to the theme of your day, which I understand is Women in Science and Meeting Challenges. The title of this slide is from an old Chinese saying, "Women hold up half the sky." Here are a couple of scientists that I know well, they're friends, and they happen to be the most recent Nobel Prize winners in chemistry, Jennifer Doudna, and physics, Andrea Ghez. Much of the technology that is commonplace today, the internet, gene editing, additive manufacturing, wireless communication, autonomous transportation, started with a single grant to a single person who had an idea. And I'm proud to say that NSF has often been there to give the first high-risk idea to a single person at the time when other people thought it was crazy. It might not even have been a very big idea, just a curious exploration into, say, a property of matter or an approach that might improve something we do routinely. But that exploration had the potential of turning into a novel finding. And then other clever people turned the finding into tools and companies. There's no way that one could have predicted the changes that followed the initial and discovers the initial work of these two people. So the point is that opportunity is all around us, waiting to be recognized and transformed. This past year, a singer named Helen Reddy passed away in the fall of this year. And her song, which was called I Am Woman, was the anthem of the 1970s, the period when I was working on my PhD. I Am Woman was sung everywhere. We need leaders of all backgrounds, and they need to be empowered. These two women started out like many of you. They became moms, they became teachers, they became researchers. So you are the leaders of tomorrow. With your unique background, your own tools, have confidence in yourself that you can meet the challenges that come your way. So I'm kind of a quiet person externally, but inside a pretty forceful person. And I'm inspired by these words of Gandhi, and I wanted to share them with you. I hope that they'll encourage you in a gentle way. You too can shape the world. Thank you very much.